Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Phoebe Kunduri. I'm a professor at the Athens University of Economics and Business and UNSDSN chair of the European Hub. And I am really honored to moderate this session on food systems, aquatic and terrestrial food. We are at a point in time, we all know that we are facing multiple crises, the pandemic, the recession that derives from the pandemic, the climate change crisis, extreme weather events in increased frequency and increased intensity, and the biodiversity collapse. And within these multiple crises, not just triple, but four crises at one time, we are asked to look into our food systems, identify the best way to manage our food systems towards a sustainable vision of the world. During the UN Nations Food Systems Summit that was recently took place recently, we renewed and accelerated our commitment to realize the goals that are relevant to food systems. Goal 2, which refers to zero hunger, and the goals that refer to reduced poverty, good health, clean water, climate change, life below water, and life on land. These are the most relevant to food systems goal in the SDG agenda, but not the only ones, as we know very well that no SDG can be fully implemented without the full implementation of the other SDGs. During this summit, we've committed to support national mechanisms to develop and implement national pathways to 2030, and do that in consistency with climate commitments of the countries, and at the same time have all relevant stakeholders involved in this transformational commitment: the international financial institutions, the private sector, the civil society, supporting country implementation. And of course, action must be driven at country level by governments in their local context. In this panel, we have set ourselves a very interesting goal, a very interesting focus of discussion, which basically refers to the fact that most work on food systems at global UN level has focused on terrestrial food systems and land use. However, we know, and there is a lot of scientific work on the linkages between terrestrial and aquatic ecosystems, and the fact that the blue and aquatic source food makes a vital contribution to nutrition, livelihoods, and environmental sustainability. One estimate is that over 870 million people depend on fisheries and aquaculture for their livelihood, and 3 billion rely on wild or farm seafood as a primary source of protein. So we have an extremely interesting panel to discuss this connection and discuss how our realization of these interlinkages between aquatic and terrestrial systems can be managed in order to sustainably support the food systems of our planet. The panel is amazing. We have with us Peter Macronic, Executive Director of Ducati Water for Food Global Institute at the University of Nebraska. Professor Macronic is the executive director and leads the Institute in delivering on its vision of a water and food secure world, building its partnerships and collaborations, not only in Nebraska, but also nationally in the US and across the globe. Our second panelist, who you will hear from, is Sushi Buddhijastuti. And I don't know, probably I am mispronouncing the name, and I beg for your forgiveness. But Sushi is an Indonesian entrepreneur. She served as the Indonesia's Minister of Maritime Affairs and Fisheries under President Joko Widodo. And she is the owner of a marine product and seafood export company, which operates a charter airline. Our third extremely interesting panelist is Dr. Shakuntala Tilsted, Global Lead for Nutrition and Public Health, World Fish, and the winner of the 2021 World Food Prize. She's the global lead for nutrition and public health at World Fish, one CGR entity. She was awarded the 2021 World Food Prize for groundbreaking research, critical insights, and landmark innovations in developing holistic, nutrition-sensitive approaches to aquatic food systems, including aquaculture and capture fisheries, which is exactly what we want to know in this panel, and in particular how aquaculture and wild fisheries can play a role that it is sustainable and protects our livelihoods, and especially those of the vulnerable people, and how it can contribute food security. Shakuntala, if you allow me, I will give you the floor just to give you, request for your first insights on the importance of aquaculture and foods and the role of fisheries in general for food security, but also given your important role in the UN Food Summit, I would love it if you can give us some feedback on the results of the summit. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Phoebe, and thank you for having me at this session. The data tells us that approximately 3 billion people around the world depend on aquatic food systems, including, as you said, captive fisheries and aquaculture for food and nutrition security. And when we think about aquatic food systems and we think about the resources that make up aquatic food systems, it includes marine as well as inland water systems. Very often the focus is just on marine, but if you look at many countries, especially in Africa and Asia, you would see that inland fishery plays a very important role for food and nutrition security. Aquatic foods is known to be a very rich source of animal protein, but that's just a very small part of the focus of aquatic foods for providing food and nutrition security. Aquatic foods provide multiple highly bioavailable micronutrients, vitamins, and minerals, such as iron, zinc, calcium, vitamin B12, and vitamin A. And these are vital nutrients for cognition, for growth and development in young children, especially in the first 1,000 days of their life, as well as for the nutrition and health of women. So in terms of livelihoods also, 800 million people depend on aquatic food systems for their livelihoods. And this is important as an entry point to improve food and nutrition security because it provides income from which you can buy nutritious foods. We also know that up to 90% of the fishers are from low and middle income countries. And it is estimated that 1 in every 2 workers in aquatic food systems are women. And they are crucial in the aquatic food systems for providing labor, many times unpaid, innovative ideas, and entrepreneurship. We also think that because of the scant data we have, and because the data is very often not disaggregated, we do think that these are underestimations of the role of women, and also we need data on youth in the system because we know from field studies that many women and youth are engaged in informal sectors such as gleaners, home-based processes, and household management of systems, of the aquatic food systems, and they are not accounted for in our data. So I'll stop there. Then you asked me about the Food System Summit. Yes, it was a very interesting and and crucial step where we are with the, in 2021 moving towards the Sustainable Development Goals in 2030. One of the important ways that these 2 years of preparations worked was there were many platforms, many dialogues from all across the sectors in governments, private sector, researchers, and many community associations that got together and held dialogues as to coming up with the solutions for going forward. And I do think that this was different from many other conferences and gave us solutions that were people-based. And for example, taking into consideration indigenous knowledge, focusing on women, indigenous peoples, and youth within the food systems. And in the area in which I work, for the first time, a real agreement that to transform food systems, we must include food, land, and water systems. And up to now, as we know, in the development of agriculture, food and nutrition, the focus has been on terrestrial foods. Thank you.
Let me unmute. Yes, now I am unmuted. Thank you so much. Very clear and very inspiring. Food, land, water systems need to be considered together in order to be able to make the transformational change that we need towards a sustainable world. I totally agree, and I think science has a lot to offer towards enabling the rest of the stakeholders towards this systems transition. I want now to turn the next question to Peter. Peter, it's again an honor to have you on this panel, and I wanted to ask you, how can we balance water demands of cities, terrestrial farms, and aquatic ecosystems under climate change?
Thank you, Phoebe. Thank you. I'm very honored to be on this panel as well with my esteemed colleagues. I also would like to thank all the participants that are on. I see people from Fiji, Nigeria, India, Indonesia, of course, and it's great to see people. It must be some difficult times of the night for some people that are on the call. Yes, in terms of the trade-offs, maybe what I would like to step back just a little bit and stress that I start off by saying that in water insecurity, or in water and agriculture, in particular agriculture, aquaculture, fisheries resources, aquatic resources, water insecurity in that context is really one of the greatest threats to sustaining global food security. I think this is something that I'm very pleased in the Food Systems Summit that water was given some the recognition. It's how do we operationalize that? I think this is an important question because it's something that we often end up not giving the attention we need to give it because of some of the complexities around it. Just in terms of the people, a point I would like to make is as we go towards the estimated 10 billion people in 2050, we often see agriculture and perhaps fisheries as well as a sector that misuses water, and therefore there's water to take to other sectors. We should be very careful with that because most estimates put the water needed to get to the food systems by 2050 an increase of more than 50% or 60%. We can do some things. We can improve our business as usual and transform how we do this. But the reality is we will actually need to take more water to produce our food in the trajectory at least we're on now. And in many cases, again, that's really at a global scale. What I then want to talk about the trade-offs and the intersectoral dynamics, we really need to come down into the local context because water is very much a contextual subject. But in many places we are overusing the water. We're mismanaging it in different ways. And it's this intersectoral competition that also contributes to this. Also not just in quantity, but also in the quality and degrading the water quality. And then on top of this, the vagaries of climate change. Right here in where I'm sitting in the middle of the US, in the last 2 years, we've experienced unheard of droughts unheard of floods, very high level of flooding in 2019. And then droughts, not so much where we're sitting in Nebraska, but further west in the US, very, very extreme droughts. So certainly we're feeling the effects of climate change even here in the Midwest of the US. I think there's climate change. I think just even as we think of the major areas where we produce our food, whether it's terrestrial or aquatic, where we produce our food, we're seeing other drivers are also have changed the landscapes and continue to change the landscape and change our water situation. This is the population, economic growth, diets are now through agriculture are changing what happens in those parts of the world. Urbanization, then the trade and market.
I cannot hear you.
Thinking of the sectors,
Peter, we cannot hear you clearly.
Sectors and water and food in that complexity. The energy, of course, and then this. I think one thing I'd like to emphasize at this point, the need to really think water is a local issue, challenge, something to manage. We really need to consider the basin. And particularly then in the context of this conversation is the basin and the impact on the coastal areas and some of the marine resources, the coastal areas being a very important ecosystem and a very productive ecosystem in terms of fisheries. So the management of not only the freshwater resources, but that interface with the marine resources is a particularly important concept to think about in terms of managing the water for agriculture and food production. I think maybe the last point, just I think, again, talking generally, the amount of water we need globally, but we expect half the population of the world by 2050 to be living in water-stressed regions. And many of those regions, many of those river basins are actually going to be the ones that are most food insecure at this point and need to actually invest more in their agriculture, aquaculture, and better using their fisheries, their wild-caught fisheries. So this is I think that once we come down to the local context and what are the capabilities in that local context to then manage those trade-offs, those synergies, there are opportunities there to better use the water, but also manage those issues that get generated. Thank you.
Excellent, Peter. Thank you. Thank you very much. I mean, I've appreciate that you highlighted the need for focusing on local scale and focus on the river basin, and also having a river from source to sea approach that is from the river basin to the sea, and try to understand the connection, how the reduced quality of water affects not just the water available at the river basin, and even at in the ground, and even with regards to the groundwater, but also what kind of water we leave for the coastal and the sea area, and how rivers affect sea ecosystems and ecosystem services, and the need to manage all this in a very holistic approach, together with the extreme weather events associated with climate change, droughts and floods, how we manage these events, how we mitigate their effects, how we help the local and national and even international stakeholders adapt to these changes, while we put effort to mitigating CO2 emissions in order to reduce these extreme weather events in the future. I wanted to ask you here very quickly to respond to something. Yes, we need to increase awareness with regards to hoping to affect demand and make sure that people economize on their use of water. This is the demand side of the story, and then you have the supply side of the story, which is quite affected by technological advancements. What do you think is most important? Is it demand management? Is it supply management? Is it, I think, the combination of the two? How is this combination of the two managed in different river basins with different capacity of understanding and also of investment in new technologies, water efficient technologies?
Good question. Thank you for that. It's both, and that's the issue we have. I think I would say there's even access because a lot of the people were then not only the demand for water, but it's the access to water, and especially in places that have not yet developed their water resources so much, and accessing the poor and disadvantaged, so they can actually use the water productively. But on the demand and supply side, both. I think on this, the point I'd like to make there on the supply side and managing that supply, that really comes down to the people and the institutions. And if you don't have the governance system in place, this makes it much more difficult. And this is an area where, again, where the resources are available, we have the infrastructure, but more importantly, we also invest in the institutions and at the scales from the community through to the sub-basin, but also at the subnational levels, and managing those challenges, because we're always dealing with changes. It's always very dynamic, and you need those institutions that are resilient themselves. And that's what's missing, or not as well developed. And in my career, as I've seen more of this, the most important building block to this is the communities and the management at the community level. You then need to think about those higher institutions and how they engage, but really focusing a lot at the community level, and then how we strengthen the upper parts of the institutions. And so I think there, one point I would like to make around the science is the importance of not just the biophysical science, but the social science. and ensuring that we really focus on what are the institutions that are already working and how can we strengthen them to manage water better. And then on the demand side, one of the things that's they're reducing demand. So one of the emphasis, we tend to focus on the equipment and the tools and the technology. And some of that's around decision support. Sometimes it's here in Nebraska, we're the sort of world center around center pivot irrigation. So we have a very large area under very technical irrigation that functions very well. And that allows us to manage the water that the water we take from the rivers or the groundwater. But the institutions are important to ensure that that water is actually, the water we save is kept in the ecosystem. What really is interest, we looked at this very carefully here in 2019, but it also applies in other parts of the world. I think the advantage we have here is we have the data to really look at this. What was really important to save water and allow a more food for less water, basically taking less water out of the ecosystem, is things like crop breeding and on-farm practice, the actual saving of the water, the actual increase in grain production or of different crops came from a lot of the crop breeding and the water. So what we need is the agronomy and the crop breeding along with the water management to get the result of more food, more sustainable food with less demand on the water resources. And this also applies, the information, how you look at this is different, but it also applies then to the livestock systems. And I would say then it also applies to the fisheries system. Perhaps I have to think about that one a little more. We didn't look at fisheries in that context in this case, but what was really important there was long-term investment in the science around the crops and the livestock systems. Over 30 years, delivered a very consistent increase in the amount of food produced per drop of water.
Indeed, and this is something we are experiencing in Europe as well. I've run myself quite a few projects on these interconnections, and it is indeed helpful to have the science to support the decisions. I've introduced you, Sushi, already, and I've said how honored and happy we are, pleased that you are with us. I would like now to turn the discussion to you and ask you about the supply chain disruptions that COVID brought on hunger and nutrition, and also ask you, as a person who knows with vast experience, not just in the political world, but also in the private sector. How can we engage the private sector? How we can engage the private sector into public-private partnerships in order to support this transformational change that we need in order to recover from COVID and support nutrition.
Yes, thank you very much for the invitation. I apologize for the disruption before. So I know it's good. What I see with the COVID-19 is it's a very, very difficult time. Yes, the catch is actually not affected. The numbers of catch of the fishermen in the area in South Coast, in the middle of Indonesia are not affected. So the fish are not really bad. The fishermen are able to catch. But the problem, tourism shut down. Export, now they have difficulties with shipping. There are not enough containers to transport within Indonesia and also to go abroad. So this is the problem. So the people who catch, they cannot sell that much. And when they can sell, they only can sell locally. So the value is low. So basically, economically, this disruption is really affecting the people. And interestingly, in another part of Indonesia, in the northern Natuna Sea, it's another story coming, because the people that they know that how you call it, not that the guard is not secure enough, but then they coming to get more. So in another part of the world, the activity is less, but there is another part of the world where activity of fishing is increasing, and they take almost all. I was in Natuna last week, and they lost the catch of 2 tons of octopus a day.
Wow.
2 to 4 tons octopus a day. When I was
There are no regulations with regards to maximum catch, or nobody imposes
the illegal fishing coming from the poaching vessel, coming from China, from because China not very close there. It's at the Nongsa, at the Spratly Island area. And then the Vietnamese vessel, and they use the big trawlers. So the baby octopus is breed at sea, but they go to the coastal for growing. And normally the population of 68,000 people, which is 80% of them are fishermen, they are in the monsoon season, and on the low season of fish, they catch the octopus. Because catching octopus is like 1 meter deep of water. They can do by snorkeling, and its value daily at least $200,000 to $300,000 value. And now it's gone. The change is coming in Vietnam and other area is the new menu of baby octopus. They are frying, they are making it crispy like a baby octopus chip, something like that. But Indonesia's side fishermen, they lost the income. And that's basically, and for a little island in the middle of nowhere, that's quite numbers. And they don't have substitute of farming, because water drought is really bad there. So all they depend is from the sea. And when they're fishing to the little bit further on the northern Natuna Sea, they come across all those big vessels. The big 500 gross tonnage trawlers from China, the 200 gross tonnage ship from Vietnam, and they're all using trawlers. And around the Natuna, southern China Sea, there is no deep sea. At the deepest is 100 meters to 200 meters. So the trawlers is really taking everything. So there is no single octopus able to come. And that's just about one single species, not yet many others also gone. But in the south coast of Java or Bali, southern West Sumatra side, it's not really bad. The catch are there, but the market access, the market connectivity, the shipping is no big problem. So, and then another part here, I would like also to talk about the plan on ocean use. I really would encourage everyone who are thinking of climate change and seeing that ocean still the cheapest, the easiest protein resource for all the coastal line, for all the coastal country, and also for the country distant fishing country. So the ocean is very important. And yes, we can grow aquaculture. We can go coastal aquaculture. We can make aquatic or offshore aquaculture. But still, all those farming need ocean fish for the fish meal. So you see there how important is the sustainability of our resource at sea. Because to make aquaculture, you need the ocean fish in the first place. 70% of the fish meal is coming from the sea. And to grow 1 kilogram of shrimps, you need 1.6 kilogram minimum of confit. And of 1.6 kilogram of confit, 70% are from the fish. So, you know, we can plan, we can design. Science can solve our problem, but still the original, the real resources, if we don't protect, because it's all coming from the oceans. So making the use of the space at sea and also protecting it from unfriendly fishing method, destructive fishing, the reef life fishing. This is a thing that I think it's a time now to have a global consensus. Because if not, it's like at the moment the Sulawesi fishermen, they are threatened by the mining mines growing with nickel growing, and they are planning on dumping the tailing into the sea by thinking, oh yeah, they have the crunch, the deepest oceans there, the marina crunch. But we have the crunch is not for filling up with the tailings. You see, this is a threat of the fisheries resource. So,
of course,
on my experience, as much as we want and able to develop the aqua farming in sustainable or in efficient way, I do still believe protecting the ocean as the first resource and the cheapest resource for the protein for us is still the most important. And the use of the space of the sea, we cannot just left country to the side. In the name of sovereignty, yes, agree, but I think it should be a global consensus policy that you cannot just taking the fisheries area for dumping the tailing, an example, or just for others' use of tourism without protecting the ecosystem. Because the health of the ocean, the reach of the ocean is the needs, is the interest of all. 68% tuna is coming from Indonesia water. They breed in our water. So when Indonesian water is disturbed, the whole supply of tuna will be disturbed. You know, and
indeed. Let me catch you there in order to build on the amazing comments that you made. I really endorse your call for spatial planning in the ocean in order to sustain the ecosystem services that support all the different activities in the ocean. And in the ocean, as you said, we have fisheries, we have aquaculture, we have the possibility, some places to already have energy production from the ocean. We have marine protected areas. We have the coastal zone, which interacts very heavily with the terrestrial zone. We have the wild fishing. We have the possibility of even building platforms with touristic activities. We have maritime, of course, long haul, short haul. So it is quite crucial to have a really explicit marine spatial planning in a very, which will be agreed for all international waters, and it will be respected and implemented in conjunction with all other policies that have to do with climate change and biodiversity conservation and food production and so on. I'm trying to ask all the questions from the panels, from our audience, and we have quite a big audience and very international one. And I have questions that really refer to this need for collaboration. How can developing countries manage their ocean against foreign and distant fishing fleets? Another question also had to do, how can policymakers collaborate on a frame of work to present the fish marine life? In general, I want to ask you, as closing remarks, because we have another 6 minutes, what do you think is the most important action, each one of you, that can allow sustainment of the ecosystem services of the ocean in conjunction with the interaction the ocean has with terrestrial ecosystem, and how can we avoid to destroy our oceans as we did our terrestrial ecosystem? I think this is one crucial question, and it would be nice if you use 2 minutes each to give some feedback, some thoughts on each. I will start with, yes, let's start with the Sushi, because you came in late. Yes, please.
Yes. What I see is a stronger collaboration is very important. And when I was having the ocean conference, we want to have not just, I commit 1 million hectare, but what's after all? What's the follow-up? Not just plain commitment, but it has to be kind of chased and a follow-up. Somebody should register and policing. So that is in place. That is really happening. Because you can commit. Yeah, I put 5 million hectares.